Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we delve into one of the most astonishing tales from the ancient world, a story of unbelievable strength, divine power, and a man who defied an entire city. This is the story of Samson and the gates of Gaza. Imagine this, the city of Gaza, a formidable stronghold of the Philistines, one of ancient Israel's most bitter enemies. The city is locked down for the night, its massive gates bolted shut, reinforced with iron and wood. Sentries patrol the walls, their spears glinting in the moonlight. Inside the city is their most wanted man, Samson. The Philistine leaders have gathered, their plan set. They will wait for the dawn, and when the sun rises, they will ambush and kill him. They believe he is trapped, a lion in a cage. The entire city is a prison, and they are the wardens. The atmosphere in Gaza is thick with tension. The Philistines are confident, whispering in the shadows, certain of their victory. He's ours now, they must have thought. At first light, Samson's reign of terror ends. They saw him as a mere mortal, a man whose luck had finally run out. They underestimated him, but more importantly, they underestimated the source of his power. As the night deepened, a storm began to brew on the horizon, mirroring the storm that was about to be unleashed within their very walls. The wind picked up, rattling shutters and kicking up dust in the empty streets. It was a premonition of the chaos to come. But Samson was no ordinary man. He was a Nazirite, set apart for God from birth, and his legendary strength was a gift from the Almighty. He wasn't sleeping soundly, oblivious to the danger. He was aware, waiting. While the Philistines plotted and waited for the morning, Samson had his own timeline. He wasn't going to wait for them to make their move. The story tells us that at midnight, the deepest, darkest hour of the night, he arose. There was no panic, no desperate attempt to find a secret escape route. Samson walked directly towards the main gate of the city. Think about the sheer audacity of this act. He wasn't sneaking out, he was making a statement. He approached the very thing that was meant to hold him captive, the city gates. These weren't just doors, these were symbols of Gaza's power and security. They were massive structures, likely several inches thick, made of heavy timber, bound with bronze or iron bars, and set into a stone framework. It would take a team of strong men and possibly animals just to swing them open and closed. They were designed to withstand a siege, to repel armies. To the Philistines, they were impenetrable. Samson reached the gate. There were no tools, no battering ram, just his two hands. The guards, who had been waiting for dawn, were likely caught completely off guard. What did they see? A lone figure in the dead of night, not trying to pick the lock, but putting his hands on the gateposts themselves. The Bible says he took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts and went away with them, bar and all. He didn't just break the lock. He ripped the entire gate assembly, the doors, the heavy wooden posts they were hinged on, and the locking bar, straight out of the ground and the wall. Can you even fathom that level of strength? It's like tearing a bank vault door off its hinges with your bare hands. The sound must have been incredible, the splintering of colossal timbers, the groaning of metal, the crumbling of stone and mortar. It would have echoed through the silent city like a thunderclap, waking everyone. The Philistine soldiers, who were so sure of their plan, would have been frozen in shock and terror. The trap they had set was not only broken, it had been contemptuously dismantled and carried away. But Samson's act of defiance didn't end there. That would have been amazing enough. What he did next elevates this story from a great escape to a legendary display of power and ridicule. He didn't just drop the gates and run, he put them on his shoulders. Let's pause to visualize this. A set of city gates, weighing hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, hoisted onto one man's shoulders. This wasn't just about escape. This was about humiliation. He was taking a souvenir, a trophy of their failure, a monument to their weakness. He was showing them that their strongest defenses were nothing to him. And where did he take them? He didn't just carry them outside the city limits. The scripture says he carried them to the top of the hill that is before Hebron. Now, let's look at the geography. Gaza is on the coastal plain. Hebron is in the hill country of Judah, about 40 miles away, and it's not a flat walk. It's a journey that goes uphill, ascending nearly 3,000 feet in elevation. Samson carried these colossal city gates on his shoulders for roughly 40 miles, uphill, all through the night. This feat is so far beyond human capability, it's almost impossible to wrap your mind around it. It's not just strength, it's supernatural endurance. When dawn finally broke, the very dawn the Philistines were waiting for, imagine the scene. The people of Gaza wake up to find a gaping hole where their gate used to be. Their security is gone. Their pride is shattered. The man they thought was trapped had walked out the front door, taking it with him, and then reports would have trickled in. Travelers from the east would have seen something unbelievable. On a hilltop overlooking Hebron, a major city of Judah, stood the gates of Gaza. Samson hadn't just escaped, he had erected a monument to his victory right in the heart of his own people's territory. This act sent a clear and terrifying message to the Philistines and a powerful message of hope to the Israelites. To the Philistines, it said, "You cannot hold me. Your walls are meaningless. Your locks are toys. My God is stronger than your entire nation." It was a psychological blow far more devastating than a military defeat. It instilled a deep-seated fear of Samson. How do you fight a man who can do this? For the Israelites, it was a stunning reminder of God's power. Samson was their champion, their judge, but his strength wasn't his own. The story repeatedly emphasizes that the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. This incredible event wasn't just about Samson's muscles. It was a demonstration of divine power working through a human vessel. It was God showing his people that he could deliver them from their enemies in the most dramatic and unexpected ways. The gates on that hill were a symbol that no prison, no enemy, no obstacle is too great for God. This story challenges us to think about the gates in our own lives, the obstacles, fears, and limitations that we believe are impenetrable. Samson's story teaches us that the strength to overcome them doesn't always come from within ourselves, but from a higher power. It's a timeless lesson about faith, courage, and the extraordinary things that can happen when we trust in a strength beyond our own. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey back in time. What do you think is the most powerful part of this story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Have you ever felt like you were destined for something great, but your own choices kept getting in the way? That's the story of Samson, a man blessed by God with impossible strength, yet cursed by his own weaknesses. His tale isn't just an ancient legend. It's a powerful mirror reflecting our own struggles with purpose, passion, and betrayal. Samson's journey begins not on a battlefield, but on a road to a place called Timnah. He was a Nazirite, set apart for God from birth, forbidden to drink wine, touch the dead, or cut his hair. But Samson was led by his eyes, not his vows. In Timnah, he saw a Philistine woman and declared to his bewildered parents, "Get her for me. She's the one I want." The Philistines were the sworn enemies of Israel. This was more than just a questionable choice. It was a direct defiance of his people's traditions and, seemingly, God's laws. His parents, deeply troubled, tried to reason with him. "Isn't there a woman among our own people?" they asked. But Samson was immovable. His desire was his compass. What they didn't know, what even Samson might not have fully grasped, was that God was about to use his flawed desires for a divine purpose. This controversial union would be the spark that ignited a fire against the Philistine oppressors. As Samson journeyed back towards Timnah, the predictable path of his life was about to be violently interrupted. Suddenly, from the vineyards, a young lion, powerful and roaring, charged at him. In that moment of pure, primal danger, something extraordinary happened. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon Samson, filling him with a power that was not his own. With nothing but his bare hands, he tore the lion apart as easily as one might tear a young goat. It was a raw, shocking display of supernatural strength, and just as quickly as the power came, the moment passed. He didn't boast. He didn't even tell his parents what had happened. He just wiped his hands and continued on his way, as if this godlike feat was a private, almost casual, secret between him and his Creator. He continued to Timnah, spoke to the woman, and the arrangement was made. The lion was dead, but the seeds of a much greater conflict were now sown. Some time later, Samson traveled the same road back to Timnah for his wedding. As he passed the spot of his secret battle, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion he had slain. Nature had already begun its work, but inside the sun-bleached skeleton, he found something completely unexpected. A swarm of bees had made their home within the lion's ribcage, and it was overflowing with honey. The Nazirite vow was clear: do not touch the dead. Yet Samson, driven by curiosity and appetite, reached in and scooped out the honey. He ate it as he walked, and even shared it with his parents, carefully concealing its origin. Out of the strong came something sweet. Out of death, life and sweetness emerged. This strange and potent symbol, a private miracle, would soon become a public and dangerous puzzle. The lion's carcass held a secret, and Samson was about to turn that secret into a weapon of wit. The wedding feast was a grand 7-day affair, a custom of the time. The Philistines, perhaps wary of this imposing Israelite, brought 30 companions to celebrate with, or maybe to watch over, Samson. Feeling confident, maybe even a little arrogant, Samson decided to entertain his new friends with a game. "Let me tell you a riddle," he announced. "If you can solve it within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 fine linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't, you will give them to me." The Philistines, intrigued and proud, accepted the challenge. Samson then posed his poetic puzzle, born from his secret encounter. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. The men were baffled. The riddle was impossible. It wasn't a test of intelligence. It was a test of loyalty, and its answer was locked away in Samson's personal experience. Day after day, they debated and argued, their frustration growing with each passing hour. The clock was ticking, and their pride was on the line. For 3 days, the Philistine companions wrestled with the riddle, their confidence turning to desperation. On the 4th day, they abandoned wit and turned to intimidation. They cornered Samson's new wife, their words dripping with menace. "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us," they threatened, "or we will burn you and your father's house to the ground." Suddenly, her wedding feast had become a hostage negotiation. Her loyalty was put to the ultimate test, her new husband or her own life and family. She went to Samson, but not with honesty. She used the weapons of tears and emotional manipulation. "You must hate me. You don't really love me," she cried day after day. "You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." Samson resisted. "I haven't even told my own parents. Why should I tell you?" But her tears were relentless. For the remainder of the feast, she wept and pleaded until finally, on the 7th day, worn down and broken, Samson gave in. He told her the secret, and she, in an act of profound betrayal, immediately took that secret and gave it to her countrymen. The sun was setting on the 7th and final day of the feast. Just before it dipped below the horizon, the Philistine men came to Samson, their faces smug with victory. With feigned cleverness, they announced the answer to his riddle. What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? They recited the words, But it was not their own wit that had solved the puzzle. Samson knew it instantly. The sting of betrayal was sharper than any sword. He looked at them, his voice cold with fury, and said, "If you had not ploughed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." The intimate term heifer was a bitter public condemnation of his wife's treachery. The game was over, but a war had just begun. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him again, not for defense, but for vengeance. He went to a nearby Philistine town, struck down 30 men, took their clothes, and threw them at the feet of those who had solved the riddle. Consumed by rage, Samson turned his back on his wedding, his wife and the life he thought he wanted, and stormed back to his father's house. His first attempt at connection had ended in betrayal and bloodshed, setting the stage for a cycle of escalating violence. Have you ever heard a story so incredible it sounds like it is ripped from the pages of a superhero comic? A tale of a man whose strength wasn't just physical, but legendary, a force of nature that defied armies and broke the very foundations of cities. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most astonishing chapters in the life of Samson, a story that blurs the line between history and myth. This isn't just about raw power. It's about a man who carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders, and sometimes the gates of its enemies too. Our story begins in a place of great danger for any Israelite, let alone its champion. Samson travels to Gaza, a major stronghold of his sworn enemies, the Philistines. Why? The scriptures tell us he went to see a harlot there. Now, this is a complicated and debated part of his story. Was it a moment of weakness? A lapse in judgment for a man consecrated to God from birth? Or was it a deliberate act of defiance, a way of walking into the lion's den to show he had no fear? We may never know his true motive, but what's undeniable is that his presence in Gaza was like a lit match in a powder keg. Word of Samson's arrival spread through the city like wildfire. "Samson is here!" The whispers turned into a clamor among the Philistine leaders. This was their golden opportunity. The man who had single-handedly humiliated them time and time again was now within their grasp, inside their own fortified city. They saw their chance to finally capture the elusive strongman who had been a thorn in their side for so long. Their plan was simple, or so they thought. They wouldn't attack him in the dead of night. No, they would be patient. They would seal the city. The Philistine soldiers gathered at the city gate, the only way in or out. They barred it, locked it, and surrounded it. "We will wait here quietly all night," they schemed. "When the morning light comes, when he tries to leave, we will have him. He will be tired, unsuspecting. We'll kill him, and his reign of terror will be over." They settled in for the night, confident in their trap. The entire city of Gaza was now a cage, and Samson, they believed, was the bird inside. The air was thick with anticipation as the guards waited, dreaming of the glory they would receive for capturing Israel's champion. But Samson was no ordinary man, and he played by no one's rules but his own. He didn't wait for morning. Around midnight, while the city slept and his would-be captors likely dozed at their posts, Samson decided it was time to leave. He rose and walked not to a secret exit, not to a weak point in the wall, but directly to the main city gate, the very heart of the Philistine trap. He arrived to find it locked and barred, a massive structure of wood and iron designed to keep armies out. For any other person, this would have been the end. For Samson, it was merely an obstacle. What happened next is the stuff of legend. Samson didn't look for a key. He didn't try to pick the lock or break the bar. He saw the entire gate assembly as a single object to be moved. Reaching down, he took hold of the two massive gate doors. He grasped the two posts they were hinged to, and he pulled. He didn't just break the lock. He tore the entire structure from the ground. Imagine the sound, the splintering of colossal timbers, the groaning of metal, the scraping of stone as the very foundations of Gaza's defense were ripped from the earth. He lifted the doors, the posts, the bar, all of it, and hoisted the immense weight onto his shoulders. The guards, woken by the thunderous noise, could only stare in stunned silence, their meticulously laid trap shattered in an instant. The man they planned to ambush was now walking away, not just escaping, but taking a piece of their city with him as a trophy. He wasn't just leaving, he was making a statement. He was demonstrating that their locks, their walls, and their armies were utterly meaningless against the power he wielded. It was an act of supreme confidence and breathtaking audacity, turning their symbol of security into a symbol of their complete and utter failure. But Samson's feat wasn't over. Carrying the city gates of Gaza would be an impossible task for any man, but he wasn't just carrying them across the street. He began a journey. He walked out of Gaza and headed east towards Hebron. Now let's put this into perspective. The distance from Gaza to the hills near Hebron is roughly 40 miles, or about 64 kilometers. And it's not a flat, easy road. It's an arduous uphill journey. Samson carried these colossal gates, weighing hundreds, perhaps thousands of pounds, on his shoulders for that entire distance. Think about that. An overnight uphill marathon while carrying an object so heavy it would take a team of oxen to move. Each step was a testament to his divinely given superhuman strength. This wasn't just an escape, it was a parade of power. He wasn't just running from his enemies, he was mocking them with every step, carrying their broken pride on his back. He wanted every traveler on that road, every village he passed, and ultimately all of Israel and Philistia to see what he had done. It was an act of psychological warfare as much as a feat of physical strength. Finally, after this unbelievable journey, he reached his destination, the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Hebron was a significant place. It was a city of great importance to the Israelites, a place deeply connected to their patriarch, Abraham. By bringing the gates of a Philistine capital and placing them in a spot overlooking a key Israelite city, Samson was sending a powerful message. He was symbolically showing the triumph of Israel over its oppressors. He laid the gates down not in secret, but on a hilltop for all to see, a monument to his victory and a declaration that the power of the God of Israel was far greater than the might of the Philistines. The story of Samson and the gates of Gaza is more than just a strongman's tale. It's a powerful narrative about defying expectations and turning a situation of certain defeat into an overwhelming victory. The Philistines thought they had him trapped, using their city's strength against him. But Samson turned their strength into a weakness, literally carrying it away on his shoulders. He demonstrated that true strength isn't found in walls and bars, but in a source far greater. It's a timeless reminder that even when the gates seem locked and the enemy surrounds you, there can be a power at play that can not only set you free, but allow you to carry away the very barriers that were meant to hold you captive. This incredible event solidified Samson's legend. It was an act so audacious, so impossible, that it would be told and retold for generations. It served as a beacon of hope for the Israelites and a chilling warning to the Philistines. Samson was more than a man. He was a living symbol of divine intervention, a flawed hero whose moments of awe-inspiring power pointed to a purpose far beyond his own understanding. His story challenges us to think about the nature of our own gates and the incredible potential that lies within us to overcome them. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of history's most epic tales. Have you ever felt trapped, surrounded, with no way out? Today, we're diving into a story about a man who faced just that, a man whose strength was so legendary it defied belief. This is the tale of Samson at the gates of Gaza. Our story finds Samson, the champion of Israel, in a place he shouldn't be, Gaza, a major city of his sworn enemies, the Philistines. Why was he there? The scriptures tell us he went to see a harlot. Now this is a complex part of his story. Samson was a man of immense physical strength, but his choices often revealed a profound moral weakness. He was a Nazirite, set apart for God from birth, yet he repeatedly flirted with danger and broke the very vows that defined his sacred calling. This visit to Gaza was a reckless act, a taunt to the Philistines in their own stronghold. As you can imagine, word of his presence spread like wildfire. "Samson is here!" The Philistine lords, who had been trying to capture him for years, saw their golden opportunity. They couldn't believe their luck. Their most feared enemy had walked right into their hands. They mobilized their forces, not for an open battle. They knew better than to face Samson head-on, but for a silent, deadly ambush. They surrounded the house where Samson was, their whispers filling the night. "He's trapped," they gloated. "There's no escape." They secured the city gates, the massive, imposing doors of iron and wood that were the pride of Gaza's defenses. Their plan was simple. Wait until morning. At the first light of dawn, when he was least expecting it, they would strike and finally put an end to the man who had tormented them for so long. The entire city was a cage, and Samson was the prize. All night, the Philistine soldiers waited, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. They held their positions, hidden in the shadows, their weapons ready. The air was thick with tension. Inside the city, Samson slept, seemingly oblivious to the net closing in around him. To the Philistines, victory seemed certain. They had him cornered. The night was their ally, and the dawn would bring their triumph. But Samson was no ordinary man. He was an instrument of divine power, and his story is full of surprises. Around midnight, long before the Philistines expected any movement, Samson arose. He didn't try to sneak out a back way or climb a wall. He did something so audacious, so utterly unthinkable, it has echoed through history for thousands of years. He walked straight to the main city gate. He didn't try to pick the lock or break the bar. He simply reached down, gripped the two massive gateposts, and pulled. Imagine the sound, the groan of stressed wood, the shriek of metal, the crack of stone foundations giving way. With a surge of supernatural strength, Samson tore the entire gate assembly, the doors, the posts, and the heavy locking bar right out of the ground. The waiting Philistine soldiers could only stare in stunned silence. Their perfect trap, their impenetrable fortress, was being dismantled before their very eyes by the sheer force of one man. They were paralyzed, not just by fear, but by sheer awe at the impossible spectacle unfolding in the midnight darkness. The man they thought they had trapped was now walking away, not just free, but carrying the very symbol of their city's power with him. But Samson wasn't finished. Freeing himself wasn't enough. He wanted to make a statement, a message that would be remembered forever. He hoisted the massive gates onto his broad shoulders. We're talking about tons of wood and metal. This wasn't just a feat of strength, it was a display of absolute dominance. He began to walk, carrying this incredible burden. He didn't just carry them outside the city. He walked and walked and walked. He left Gaza behind, heading east. The journey was uphill, a grueling trek of nearly 40 miles. He carried the gates all the way to the top of a hill that overlooks Hebron. Hebron was a significant city in the heart of Judah, the land of his own people. Think about the symbolism. He took the pride and security of his enemies and placed it on a hill overlooking his home, turning their strength into a monument of their own humiliation. It was the ultimate act of defiance. It was a message to both the Philistines and to Israel. To the Philistines it said, "Your walls cannot hold me. Your power is nothing." And to his own people, who were often living in fear, it was a powerful reminder of the strength God had provided for their deliverance. When the sun rose that morning, the people of Gaza awoke to a shocking sight, a gaping hole where their gate once stood. Their defenses were gone, their pride shattered. And on a distant hilltop, the silhouette of their own gates stood as a testament to the night's impossible events. The man they had tried to trap had not only escaped, but had carried their fortress away on his back. Samson's story is a powerful mix of incredible strength and tragic flaws. His life is a reminder that divine power can work through imperfect people. This incredible feat at Gaza wasn't just about physical muscle. It was a demonstration of a power that transcends human limitations. It's a story of turning a situation of certain defeat into an unforgettable victory, a legendary tale of a hero who literally carried the weight of his enemy's pride on his shoulders. What do you think of this incredible story? Does it inspire you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Samson's journey is far from over, and it's filled with more drama, tragedy, and astonishing displays of power. A tale of love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of a broken promise. This is the story of Samson, a man blessed with supernatural strength, whose downfall came not from a mighty army, but from a whisper in the dark. Imagine a man, Samson, whose strength was legendary. He could tear a lion apart with his bare hands and defeat 1,000 men with nothing but the jawbone of a donkey. This power wasn't his own. It was a gift from God, a sacred trust symbolized by one simple vow. His hair was never to be cut. He was a Nazirite, set apart from birth for a divine purpose. His long, flowing hair was the outward sign of his inner covenant, the physical manifestation of his incredible power. For years, Samson walked as a giant among men, a champion for his people against the Philistines. But every giant has a weakness, and Samson's was not a physical one. His weakness was found in the matters of the heart. He fell deeply in love with a woman named Delilah. The Philistine lords, his sworn enemies, saw this as their golden opportunity. They approached Delilah with an offer she couldn't refuse, a fortune in silver if she could uncover the source of Samson's impossible strength. The trap was set. 3 times Delilah pleaded with Samson. "Tell me the secret of your great strength," she would ask, her voice a sweet melody hiding a venomous intent. 3 times Samson lied to her, toying with her, perhaps not fully grasping the danger he was in. He told her to tie him with fresh bowstrings, then with new ropes, and then to weave his hair into a loom. Each time she would cry out, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson!" And each time he would break his bonds, as if they were mere threads, laughing off the attempt. But Delilah was persistent. Her questions became a daily torment, a relentless chipping away at his resolve. She accused him of not truly loving her, her tears and pleas wearing him down day after day. The Bible tells us that his soul was vexed to death. He was exhausted, emotionally drained and cornered by the one person he thought he could trust. Finally, in a moment of profound vulnerability and fatal weakness, he surrendered. He told her everything. He confessed the sacred vow he had carried since birth. "A razor has never come upon my head," he admitted, "for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." He had given her the key not just to his strength, but to his very identity, his divine connection. The secret was out. Lulling him to sleep on her lap, Delilah called for a man to come and shave the 7 locks of his hair. As the cold blade glided through his hair, it wasn't just strands that fell to the floor, it was his covenant, his power, his divine protection. When Delilah cried out for the final time, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson," he awoke, thinking he could escape as before. He said, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But the scripture gives us one of the most chilling lines in this entire saga. "But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him." Imagine that moment. the feeling of emptiness where immeasurable power once resided. He reached for the strength that had defined his entire life, and for the first time it wasn't there. The Spirit of God, the source of his might, was gone. He was just a man. The Philistines seized him. The champion who had once been untouchable was now helpless, and their revenge was cruel. They gouged out his eyes, plunging the man who had seen so much victory into a world of total darkness. They bound him with bronze fetters and took him to Gaza, the very city where he had once ripped the gates from the walls. There, the mighty Samson, the judge of Israel, was forced to grind grain in a prison, a task reserved for the lowest of servants. He became an object of mockery, a broken symbol of his people's defeated hopes. His days turned into a monotonous cycle of darkness, labor, and humiliation. But in that darkness, something began to happen. Forgotten, cast aside, Samson's hair began to grow again. With each fraction of an inch, perhaps a flicker of hope, a seed of a final desperate plan began to grow as well. As the Philistines decided to hold a great festival to celebrate their victory, offering a sacrifice to their god Dagon for delivering Samson into their hands. The temple was packed with thousands of people. All the lords of the Philistines were there, and about 3,000 men and women were on the roof, eager to see the fallen hero. They called for Samson to be brought out so they could mock him. Led by a young boy, the blind giant was placed between the two central pillars that supported the entire temple. The laughter and jeers of the crowd echoed in his ears. In that moment of ultimate humiliation, Samson prayed his final prayer. It was not a prayer for escape, but for retribution and redemption. He cried out to God, "O Lord God, remember me, I pray, strengthen me, I pray, just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." He placed one hand on each of the massive pillars. He felt the weight of the entire structure, the weight of his past failures, and the weight of his final purpose. With a final, earth-shattering roar, he shouted, "Let me die with the Philistines!" And he pushed with all his might. The pillars gave way. The temple collapsed in a storm of stone and dust, bringing the roof down upon the lords and all the people within. In his death, Samson achieved his greatest victory, destroying more of his enemies in that single moment than he had in his entire life. It was a tragic end, but also a powerful one. His story serves as a timeless warning about the dangers of compromise, the corrosive nature of betrayal, and the profound truth that our greatest strengths can be undone. In the ancient tapestry of heroes and villains, few tales are as charged with passion, betrayal, and tragic downfall as that of Samson and Delilah. This isn't just a story of a strong man and a beautiful woman. It's a deep dive into the human heart, exploring the intoxicating power of desire and the devastating price of misplaced trust. We often remember Samson for his superhuman strength, a gift from God that made him a champion for his people. But what happens when that strength, both physical and emotional, is put to the ultimate test, not by an army, but by the one person he lets into his heart? And what of Delilah? Is she merely a greedy traitor, or a woman caught in a web of power, loyalty, and survival? Join me as we unravel the seductive, psychological, and ultimately tragic story of Samson and Delilah. A story that resonates with timeless warnings about the secrets we keep and the vulnerabilities we expose. Our story finds its setting in the sun-scorched valley of Sorek, a land caught in the long and bitter struggle between the Israelites and their powerful oppressors, the Philistines. Samson, a Nazirite from birth, was a legend in his own time. His long, uncut hair was the symbol of his vow to God, and the very source of his incredible power. He was a one-man army, a thorn in the side of the Philistine lords who ruled the land. They had tried everything to subdue him, ambushes, armies, brute force, but all had failed. Samson was untouchable, a divine force of nature. Frustrated and desperate, the Philistine rulers realized they couldn't defeat Samson with swords and spears. They needed a different kind of weapon, one that could bypass his muscles and strike at his heart. And that's when they found Delilah. We don't know much about Delilah's origins, only that she lived in the valley and that her beauty was captivating. When the lords of the Philistines approached her, their proposal was as direct as it was tempting. They said to her, "Coax him and find out the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him to bind and subdue him. Each of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." Let's pause to consider that. 1,100 shekels from each of the 5 Philistine lords. This was an astronomical sum of money, a fortune that could guarantee a lifetime of luxury and security. For a woman in her position, this offer was life-changing. Was it just greed that motivated her, or was it pressure, a sense of loyalty to her own people, the Philistines? The story doesn't tell us her inner thoughts, leaving us to wonder. What it does make clear is that she agreed. The stage was set for a dangerous game of seduction and deception. The first test began. With Samson resting in her home, Delilah began her delicate and deadly work. "Tell me," she purred, her voice a soft whisper against his skin, "what is the secret of your great strength? How can you be tied up and subdued?" Samson, perhaps amused by her curiosity, or maybe already blinded by his affection, decided to play along. He gave her a riddle, a half-truth. "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried," he told her, "I will become as weak as any other man." Delilah relayed this information to the Philistine soldiers hiding nearby. That night, as Samson slept, she tied him with the 7 fresh bowstrings. Then she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" He awoke, and with effortless ease snapped the bowstrings as if they were threads scorched by fire. The first attempt had failed. His secret remained safe, but Delilah was just getting started. Undeterred, Delilah employed a new tactic, emotional manipulation. She feigned hurt and disappointment. "You have made a fool of me," she accused him, her voice laced with a theatrical sorrow. "You lied to me. Please tell me how you can be tied up." Her performance must have been convincing. Samson, perhaps wanting to appease her and continue their game, offered another false answer. "If they bind me securely with new ropes that have never been used," he explained, "I will become weak and be like any other man." Once again, the trap was set. Delilah bound him with new ropes while the Philistine soldiers lay in wait. And once again, she shouted the warning, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And just as before, he snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were mere threads. The charade continued, but with each lie, Samson was unknowingly drawing closer to the edge, underestimating the relentless determination of the woman he thought he controlled. Delilah was growing impatient, and her act became more desperate. The sweet coaxing turned into sharp, nagging accusation. "Until now, you have been making a fool of me and lying to me," she said, her frustration palpable. "Tell me how you can be tied." Her persistence was a form of psychological warfare. She was wearing him down, not with force, but with the relentless pressure of her desire. Samson, perhaps tiring of the game or feeling the weight of her constant pleading, gave her a more intricate clue, one dangerously close to the truth. He told her, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." This was a major step. For the first time, he mentioned his hair, the sacred symbol of his strength. As he slept, Delilah meticulously wove his long braids into her loom. Then, for the 3rd time, she cried, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" He awoke and ripped his hair free from the loom, pulling the entire weaving apparatus with him. The secret was still his, but the walls around it were crumbling. He had invited her closer to his vulnerability than ever before, and Delilah now knew his hair was the key. This is where the story turns from a game of cat and mouse into a full-blown psychological siege. Delilah unleashed her most powerful weapon, the manipulation of love itself. The daily nagging became an endless torrent. The Bible says she pressed him daily with her words and urged him so that his soul was vexed to death. Imagine that, being so emotionally tormented by someone you care for that you feel your very soul is dying. She weaponized his affection for her. She likely said things like, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when you won't confide in me? This is the third time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." She questioned his love, his trust, his commitment. For Samson, a man of immense physical power, this emotional onslaught was an attack he was not equipped to handle. His strength was external, but his emotional defenses were being systematically dismantled. He was isolated, trapped not by ropes or bowstrings, but by his own heart. The strongest man in the world was being brought to his knees by a persistent, cutting whisper. Finally, broken and exhausted, Samson surrendered. He poured out his entire heart to her. He told her everything. "A razor has never been used on my head," he confessed, "because I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." In that moment of complete vulnerability, Samson sealed his own fate. He gave away the divine secret he had protected his entire life, trading it for what he hoped would be a moment of peace, a final affirmation of love. Delilah knew with chilling certainty that this time he had told her the truth. The game was over. She had won. She sent a message to the Philistine lords, "Come up this once, for he has told me all his heart." They came, silver in hand, and as Samson slept with his head in her lap, a man was called in to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. As his hair fell to the floor, his strength drained away with it. Delilah shook him awake with the familiar terrible cry, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke and thought, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. This is perhaps the most tragic line in the entire story. In his arrogance, he believed his strength was his own to command. He didn't realize that in breaking his vow, he had severed his connection to its divine source. The Philistines seized him. They gouged out his eyes, turning the man who saw so much into a blind spectacle. They brought him down to Gaza, bound him with bronze shackles, and forced him to grind grain in the prison. The mighty champion of Israel, the man who tore lions apart with his bare hands, was now a powerless, blind slave, an object of ridicule for his enemies. His downfall was absolute, a direct result of a slow, agonizing unraveling at the hands of Delilah. The story of Samson and Delilah serves as a powerful and timeless allegory. It warns us about the dangers of arrogance, of confusing a gift with a personal possession. Samson's strength was not truly his, it was a divine trust, and he treated it carelessly. It's also a profound lesson in the nature of trust and vulnerability. Samson gave his heart to someone who was fundamentally untrustworthy, and he paid the ultimate price. He repeatedly ignored red flags, choosing to believe in a fantasy rather than confront a painful reality. Delilah's character forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about motivation. Was she purely evil, or a complex figure driven by a mix of greed, self-preservation, and perhaps even national loyalty? This ancient tragedy continues to resonate because it reflects our own human struggles with desire, betrayal, and the secrets we choose to reveal. It reminds us that the greatest threats often come not from an external enemy, but from the vulnerabilities we allow within our own hearts. The story of Samson, a man chosen from birth, blessed with supernatural strength, who found himself brought low, not by an army, but by betrayal. Our story begins in the city of Gaza, within the cold, damp walls of a Philistine prison. Samson, once the terror of the Philistines, the man who could tear a lion apart with his bare hands, was now a shadow of his former self. Blinded, shorn of his legendary locks, the very source of his Nazirite vow and divine strength, he was forced to grind grain like a common beast of burden. The mighty judge of Israel was a public spectacle, a broken trophy for his enemies to gloat over. Yet in the darkness of that prison, something unseen was happening. Slowly, quietly, day by day, his hair began to grow back. It was a silent promise, a whisper of redemption in the midst of despair, a sign that even in our lowest moments, grace can find a way. Meanwhile, the lords of the Philistines were preparing for a grand celebration, a festival dedicated to their chief deity, Dagon, the fish god. They believed Dagon had delivered their greatest enemy into their hands. The city was abuzz with excitement. From all corners of the Philistine Empire, people flocked to the capital. The temple of Dagon, a massive structure, was filled to capacity. The scripture tells us that all the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof alone were about 3,000 men and women, all eager to see the fallen champion. The feasting and revelry reached a fever pitch. Drunk with wine and arrogance, the crowd began to chant, "Bring out Samson! Let him entertain us! Let us see the mighty Israelite hero now!" The call echoed through the temple, a cruel, mocking roar. So they led Samson from the prison. A young boy guided the blind giant by the hand, leading him into the heart of the celebration, placing him between the two central pillars that supported the entire temple roof. The crowd erupted. Laughter and jeers rained down upon him. They poked and prodded him, ridiculing his former strength, mocking his god. Imagine the scene. Samson, standing in the center of thousands of his sworn enemies. He could hear their taunts, feel their scorn. The weight of his past mistakes, his broken vows, and his foolish pride must have crashed down upon him. He had been given a gift from God, a sacred trust, and he had squandered it. But in that moment of ultimate humiliation, something shifted within him. It was a moment of profound clarity, of deep repentance. The noise of the crowd faded, and a quiet fire began to burn in his soul. This was not about revenge. It was about redemption. It was about one final act of service to the God he had forsaken. He turned to the boy who held his hand. "Position me so I can feel the pillars that support the temple," he said, his voice low but firm. "I want to lean against them." The unsuspecting boy did as he was asked, guiding Samson's hands to the two massive stone columns that were the linchpin of the entire structure. These pillars bore the weight of the roof and the thousands of people upon it. With his hands firmly placed, Samson closed his eyes. The taunts of the crowd became a distant hum. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a warrior preparing for his final battle. He bowed his head and prayed. It was not a prayer for escape or for his own life. It was a prayer of complete surrender and renewed purpose. "Sovereign Lord," he cried out, his voice filled with an intensity that silenced the nearby mockers, "remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more time." This was the plea of a man who knew his own strength was nothing. He was calling on the true source of all power. He continued, "Let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." This wasn't just personal vengeance. It was a plea for divine justice against the enemies of his people and his God. It was a final act of his calling as a judge of Israel. Then Samson braced himself. He pushed with his right hand against one pillar and with his left hand against the other. As he strained, he shouted his final earth-shattering words, "Let me die with the Philistines." In that instant, the power of God surged through him, a power far greater than any he had known before. It was the strength of a renewed covenant, the force of a divine purpose fulfilled. The muscles in his arms and back, honed by a lifetime of impossible feats, now strained with the very power of heaven. A deep, ominous groaning sound echoed through the temple as the colossal stone pillars began to fracture. Cracks spider-webbed across their surface. The faces of the Philistine lords, once twisted in mockery, now contorted in sheer terror. The thousands on the roof felt the structure shift beneath their feet. The celebratory music was drowned out by the splintering of stone and the screams of panic. The pillars gave way. With a cataclysmic roar, the entire roof of the temple collapsed inward, bringing down thousands of tons of stone, timber, and humanity. In one final sacrificial act, the temple of Dagon was utterly destroyed. The celebration turned into a tomb. The Bible tells us that Samson killed more people in his death than he had during his entire life. All the rulers of the Philistines, along with thousands of their people, perished with him. Samson, the flawed hero, the broken champion, fulfilled his destiny. He died not as a prisoner, but as a deliverer, crushing the leadership of Israel's oppressors in a single victorious moment. His life serves as a powerful reminder that it's not how we start, but how we finish. It shows that even after our greatest failures, God's grace can bring about our greatest victory. Have you ever wondered what true strength really is? We often think of bulging muscles, of someone who can lift incredible weights or win any fight. And when we think of that kind of strength, one name from history often comes to mind: Samson. Samson, the man whose birth was announced by an angel, a man set apart from birth, dedicated to God as a Nazirite, blessed with supernatural physical power. His story is filled with legendary feats that sound like something out of a superhero comic: tearing a lion apart with his bare hands, slaying 1,000 men with nothing but the jawbone of a donkey, carrying the massive gates of a city on his shoulders and walking them up a hill. When you hear these stories, you can't help but be in awe. He was, by all accounts, the strongest man who ever lived, an unstoppable force. But as we look deeper into his life, a more complex picture emerges. We see a man who, despite his divine gift, was often driven by his own desires, his passions, and his pride. He was impulsive, making decisions based on what he saw and wanted in the moment, rather than what he knew was right. He married a Philistine woman against his parents' wishes, a decision that led to a cycle of vengeance and bloodshed. He constantly flirted with danger, taunting his enemies, seemingly believing his strength made him invincible. It's a pattern we see repeated throughout his life. He was given a sacred vow, a sign of his dedication to God. The 3 pillars of his Nazirite vow were to abstain from wine and strong drink, to never touch a dead body, and to never cut his hair. These weren't magic rules. They were symbols of his obedience, his connection to the source of his true power, God. Yet we see him time and time again bending these rules, pushing the boundaries. After killing the lion, he later returned to scoop honey from its carcass, directly violating his vow. He feasted with the Philistines, where strong drink was surely present. He lived a life on the edge, trusting in his own might rather than the one who gave it to him. And then came Delilah. She wasn't the first woman to capture his attention, but she would be the last to break his heart and his will. The Philistine lords, desperate to neutralize their greatest threat, saw an opportunity. They offered Delilah a fortune to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. 3 times she tried, and 3 times Samson lied to her, playing a dangerous game. He seemed to enjoy the chase, the thrill of being one step ahead. It's almost as if he couldn't believe his power could ever truly be taken away. He had grown so accustomed to his strength that he forgot where it came from. He started to believe it was his own. This is a trap that's so easy to fall into, isn't it? We all have gifts, talents, and strengths. Maybe it's a skill we've mastered, a sharp mind, or a charismatic personality. And over time, we can start to take ownership of them. We forget that every good and perfect gift is from above. We lean on our own understanding, our own abilities, and our connection to the source of that strength begins to weaken, just like Samson's. Finally, worn down by Delilah's constant nagging, Samson gave in. He told her everything. He confessed that his strength wasn't in his muscles, but in his uncut hair, the final, visible symbol of his vow to God. He laid his head in her lap, a position of complete vulnerability and trust in the wrong person. And as he slept, the final thread of his consecration was severed. When he awoke, the Philistines were upon him, and the Bible tells us something heartbreaking. It says, he awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Imagine that moment. The moment the strongest man in the world reached for a power that was no longer there. The strength he had relied on his entire life was gone. Not because his hair was cut, but because his heart had strayed so far from God that the symbol no longer held any meaning. His disobedience had finally caught up to him. His enemies, who had trembled at his name, now captured him with ease. They gouged out his eyes, bound him in bronze shackles, and forced him to grind grain in a prison. The mighty hero became a spectacle of shame and defeat, blinded, broken, and alone. But the story doesn't end there. In that dark, humbling prison, something began to change. Stripped of his physical strength, his pride, and his sight, Samson was forced to see in a different way. He had nothing left to rely on but God. The Bible notes a small but significant detail. His hair began to grow back. This wasn't just a physical change, it was a symbol of a deeper, spiritual renewal. In his weakness, in his complete brokenness, Samson started to find his way back. He began to pray. His final act is perhaps his most famous. The Philistines, in a great celebration for their god, Dagon, brought Samson out to entertain the crowds. Thousands were gathered in the temple, mocking the man they once feared. But Samson wasn't the same man. He was humbled. He asked the servant to guide his hands to the main pillars of the temple, and there, blind and broken, he uttered his final prayer. It wasn't a prayer for his own glory or escape. It was a cry for one last surge of strength, not for vengeance, but for justice. He prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more." In that moment of total surrender and renewed faith, God answered. Samson pushed against the pillars with all his might, and the temple came crashing down, destroying the Philistine leadership and more of their people than he had killed in his entire life. He sacrificed himself, but in that final act, he fulfilled the purpose for which he was born, to begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. Samson's life is a powerful and sobering lesson. It teaches us that true strength isn't about physical ability, talent, or self-reliance. True strength is found in obedience. It's found in a humble, consistent relationship with God. Samson was strongest, not when he was boasting of his power, but when he was broken and crying out to his Creator. His story serves as a mirror for our own lives. It asks us, where are we placing our trust? In our own abilities, or in the one who gave them to us? Are we, like Samson, flirting with compromise, believing we are too strong to fall? The beauty of his story is the redemption found in the final chapter. It shows us that no matter how far we've strayed, no matter how broken we feel, it is never too late to turn back. In our moments of greatest weakness, when we feel like we have nothing left, that is often when God can do his most powerful work in us. Samson's true victory wasn't tearing a lion apart. It was the quiet prayer of a humbled man in a dark prison, a prayer that was heard and answered. His life reminds us that our greatest strength is discovered when we fully surrender our own. Thank you so much for joining me in reflecting on this incredible story. If it resonated with you, Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, take care.